Alright, so welcome to the first episode in a new series on harmony. In this series, I plan on tackling all the basics of writing harmonies that are necessary for any composer looking to hone their craft. Each episode will build on the previous one, and by the end of the series, you'll have all the tools necessary to come up with interesting and effective chord progressions for all your future projects. In this video, we're going to address functional harmony for major keys as well as some basic voice leading. In order to do this, we first need to know what chords are actually available to us in the major scale. So the first half of this video is going to be dedicated to learning the music theory behind the chords of a major scale. If you're already pretty comfortable with this topic, please feel free to use the timestamp in the description to skip to the part where we'll start discussing functional harmony and voice leading. So with that, let's get started by taking a look at the C major scale. The C major scale contains the notes C, D, E, F, G, A, and B, before repeating. If we look at the distance between these notes on a keyboard, we see that the order of intervals between each note follows a pattern. We have a whole step from C to D, another whole step from D to E, then a half step, another whole step, another whole step, one last whole step, and finally another half step, which brings us back to C. This same pattern can be used to find any given major scale. Just pick a note to start on and follow the pattern from there. For example, if we start with D, move up a whole step, half step, whole, half, we find the D major scale. The same goes for starting on G. We get the G major scale, or even on a B flat, we'll get the B flat major scale. You see what I mean? Every single major scale follows the exact same pattern of intervals. The only difference between them is which note they start on. If we want to find out what chords are available to us in any given scale, all we need to do is follow the add-skip rule. For this rule, we start with one note and add it to our chord. We skip the next note in the scale and add the third. Then we skip the next note and add the fifth. Doing this in the C major scale gives us a C major triad, where the first is C, the third is E, and the fifth is G. This is the chord that the scale is named after. We know it's a C major triad because the interval between the first two notes, or C and E, is a major third, or 4 half steps, 1, 2, 3, 4. While the interval between the second two notes, E and G, is a minor third, or 3 half steps, 1, 2, 3. This combination of a major third on bottom and a minor third on top is what makes a major triad a major triad. If we follow the same add-skip rule for the rest of the scale, we can build the next chord by starting with the second scale degree, skipping the next note, adding the third, skipping the fourth, and then adding the fifth. This gives us a D minor triad. We know it's a minor triad because the distance between the first two notes is a minor third, and the distance between the second two is a major third. This is the opposite of the major triad and is what defines a minor triad. Following this same pattern, we find that the remaining triads we're working with are E minor, F major, G major, A minor, and B diminished, where a diminished triad is just a triad that consists of 2 minor third intervals. Put together, we find that the order of chords in C major goes major first, minor second, minor third, major fourth, major fifth, minor sixth, and diminished seventh. Since all major scales follow the same pattern of intervals, they also all share the same exact order of chords. These chords are thus called the diatonic chords of the major scale, or the chords that will always appear naturally out of any major scale. If we want to find out what triads were in the scale of D major, all we would have to do is name each of these chords using the notes found in the D major scale. D major, E minor, F sharp minor, G major, A major, B minor, and C sharp diminished. Now that we know how to find the diatonic chords of any given major scale, it's time to look at how these particular chords are used in functional harmony. In functional harmony, the whole idea is that every chord in a scale can be sorted into one of three chord families: the tonic family, the subdominant family, and the dominant family. The tonic family tends to be full of strong chords, or chords that feel stable and solid. Both the subdominant and dominant families contain weak chords, or chords that carry tension and want to resolve. The dominant family in particular is very weak and typically wants to resolve to the tonic. In the major key, the tonic family consists of chords built on the first, third, and sixth scale degrees. So in the key of C major, that would be the C major triad, E minor triad, and A minor triad. The subdominant family consists of chords built on the second, fourth, and seventh scale degrees. In the key of C major, that would be the D minor triad, F sharp major triad, and B diminished triad. Finally, the dominant family consists of chords built on the fifth scale degree, or in C major, that would be just the G major triad. So this is all well and good, but how do we actually apply any of this? Well, another way to look at it is to think of each of these chords as being either A, strong, or B, weak. All the chords from the tonic family are strong, and all the remaining chords are weak. When writing chord progressions, we can follow the general pattern of strong, weak, or A, B, A, B. You can use any chord from the tonic family as long as you follow it up with a chord from the subdominant or dominant family. Any combination at all will work. When you're ready to end a phrase or a chord progression, you can follow the same pattern and then just simply end on a strong chord, since chords from the tonic family are stable and don't carry any tension that needs to resolve. Now, you could, of course, end on a weak chord, but a subdominant chord would sound less satisfying, and ending on a dominant chord would just really sound like you cut things off early. It would still have a lot of momentum that would want to carry it back to a strong chord. Another option for ending your chord progression is to use the more traditional model of functional harmony, by starting with a chord from the tonic family, then a chord from the subdominant family, followed by a chord from the dominant family, and then finally another chord from the tonic family. Typically the chord built off the first scale degree. And with that, you've got the basics for functional harmony in major keys. Before wrapping up this video, however, let's take a look at how we can voice lead our chord progressions once we've written them. So voice leading is basically just a way of smoothing out the transition from one chord to another. It helps make your harmonies sound much smoother and even a bit more cinematic. The steps for voice leading are deceptively simple. First, we just need a chord progression. Here's a simple one that I came up with. Step 1 is to double the root of each chord to create the bass line. The root is the note that each chord is named after. This doesn't necessarily need to be the note you choose for your bass line, but we'll go over that in future videos of this series. Once we've done this, step 2 is to rearrange the original notes of each chord to eliminate as much movement as possible. This means that notes that are shared across chords should remain in the same voice, while all other notes should be moved by either seconds or thirds. Before we do this, I should mention that parallel fifths and fourths should be avoided if you want to emphasize the independence of each line, essentially making your harmony sound like multiple different voices or instruments working together. Or you can ignore this guideline if you don't mind a blockier sound that focuses more on the sound of each individual chord rather than the voices that make them up, which is much more common in pop music than concert music. Honestly, it's up to your own tastes. However, if you do want to avoid parallel fifths and fourths, here are a few quick and easy guidelines to help. If the roots of two chords are separated by an interval of a second or a seventh, move two voices by step and one voice by a third. If the roots of two chords are separated by an interval of a third or a sixth, keep the two common tones in the same voices and move the remaining note by step. If the roots of two chords are separated by an interval of a fourth or a fifth, keep the common tone in one place and move the remaining two by step. Finally, whenever possible, make sure that the highest and lowest voices move in the opposite directions of each other. So, if one is moving up to a higher pitch, the other should be moving to a lower pitch. If this is not possible, the next best alternative is to have one voice remain stable, or not changing pitch, while the other one does. So, with these steps in mind, let's try voice leading our chord progression.
All right, so here we have our chord progression. All right, so let's give it a quick listen. All right, so just a pretty standard chord progression, but now we are going to voice lead it to make it sound a lot more smooth, a lot more independent, all that good stuff. So step one, if you remember, was to double the roots of every chord, and we're going to drop them down to put them in the bass line. I'm going to drop them 2 octaves for now. We'll bring it back up later, but just to give us a little more space to work up here. So the next step is to smooth out each of these chords step 3 and step 4 and step 2, like really all 3 of those steps tend to happen at the same time. So step 2, first thing we want to do is make sure that we are smoothing out this chord progression. All right, so C major and F major are both separated by a perfect fourth interval between the C and the F. There are 5 half steps between these 2 notes. So since it's separated by a fourth, to help avoid parallel fifths and fourths, we want to make sure that the one common tone between both chords, which is C in this situation, remains in the same voice, while the other 2 are going to move by step. So G to A, E to F. So that's good. But we also want to keep in mind that we want this top line to move in the opposite direction of the bass line, if possible. So the bass line is going higher in pitch. It doesn't look like we have any lines that go lower in pitch. The C goes to the C, that's staying the same. G goes to A, that's increasing, and E goes to F, that's also increasing in pitch. So since we don't have the option of moving in contrasting motion or in the opposite direction, we're going to go with our second place winner, which is just oblique motion, where one voice stays in the same pitch while the other moves. All right, so from here, we have F major to E minor. All right, so these are separated by a second. All right, actually a minor second. So that's going to mean technically we want to move 2 voices by step, 1 by a third. So if you look, each of these notes are already moving by second, and that's nice, but it tends to give this blocky feel of just one chord moving into the next chord, which is perfectly fine if you like that sound. But in terms of the orchestra, rather than playing on a keyboard in an orchestra kind of setting, we want to have a little more independence. We want each of these voices to sound like its own line, so each of those can be assigned to a different instrument. So we want one of these voices to move by a third, while the others move by a step. So C, a third from C would be E. So let's take this E down here and move it up. All right, so the C moves to E, that's a third. A to B, that's a step, and F to G, that's also a step. And as a bonus, look at this. All right, F moves down to E, C moves up to E. All right, that's contrasting motion. That's exactly what we want. All right, so then we've got E minor to G major. All right, these 2 are separated by a third. All right, E to G is a minor third. So that means 2 common tones stay in the same voice. The other moves by step. We've already done this naturally as it is. And as an added bonus, we have that contrasting motion. E is moving down to D. E is down here is moving up to G. So that's good for us. Now we just have from G to C. So G major to C major. Both of those are separated by a perfect fifth. So once again, we want to make sure we keep the common tone in the same voice and move the other voices by step. So I'm going to move those. So G stays on G, B moves to C, D moves to E. And again, wonderful, because the G is moving down to C in the bass, and now the top line is moving to an E. So they're moving in the opposite direction, which again is that contrasting motion. So let's raise that bass line an octave again and listen to how it sounds now. There we go. Awesome. So perfectly well and sound voice leading.
And with that, we've reached the end of yet another video. I hope you found it helpful. There are still plenty more videos in this series to come. We'll be touching on the different aspects of harmony in each one and adjusting our approach to voice leading along the way. So make sure to get lots of practice in with these concepts before watching the next video. If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe to this channel and consider supporting me on Patreon. All proceeds go towards helping to make tuition payments for school. A quick thank you goes out to all of my amazing patrons, especially to Alice, who gave me the idea to do this series in the first place. I appreciate each and every one of you and have really enjoyed getting to know you guys. And with that, as always, keep working hard, keep studying, and keep writing new music.